Folks ask all the time about how to start breaking these stands up, and the best way to do it is once it supports it, once you've got enough volume there that you can actually support a harvest, is to just go through, cut trails, and do like maybe small areas of thinning where the trees are a little bit healthier. In through one like this, you'll probably get some pockets where there's a lot of fir. Just start to cut a few little patches and that type of stuff in through there, and break them up. Pine needles tend to grow in bunches. Mostly you'll find white pine, red pine. So white pine grows with 5 needles in a bunch. There's 5 letters in white, and then red pine grows with 3 usually, and there's three letters in red. What the weevil does is they like to lay their eggs, so the female will bore a hole in, lay the larva in the leader. They come out, they'll eat their way around, kills the leader, and then you'll get all your side branches, and they all grow up and try and take off. So the best thing for white pine, we always say for the weevils, is they're afraid of the dark and they don't like heights. So you can grow your pine in a little bit of shade, you tend to get less weevil damage. And once you get it to about 20 feet tall, if you have it with minimal or no damage, they actually think it's something to do with something climactic, like you get a little bit of change in the air or whatever, but they don't tend to affect anything over, say, 20 feet tall. Now, what do you do in sites like this where you got the hemlock coming, but you also got hemlock woolly adelgid, which doesn't, it's different than other bugs that, only attack old trees and everything. I've been in a few stands that are really infested with it in the west, and like say that was a young hemlock like that, it'd just be white on the top of it. Like it's terrible. Doing nothing is never the wrong thing. Like we grew forest for a long time here before any human ever showed up. Mother Nature can look after herself no matter what you do. Like even within the ecological forestry stuff, like we're trying to do with the Family Forest Network and everything, and just in general, especially on private woodlots, you get the question sometimes especially from folks that are more sensitive to harvesting, like why do you have to cut wood there? And you never have to. That forest is going to go back to what it wants to be. It's just that through active harvesting and careful, intentional management, you can get it there a lot faster. One of the things you're always looking for now, even though it's not regulated on private land right now, is these wet forest sites are fairly sensitive. If you're in a richer area, it's where you might start to find some unique species. A lot of times they find big groupings of salmon around this little spring that you don't even really see, and it doesn't have to be buffered through forestry or anything, and they could actually show ones that came through a cut block. Water obviously warms up a little bit, and then it's warm water. The fish want to avoid it, where if they left tree cover, buffered it, even though the regulations weren't there, you'd find a lot of salmon pooled in that area because it's just that nice little bit of cooler water and better for them. This is identified as a reserve area. It's such a cool spot, but it's one of the veg types that we're looking at for a project specifically around not just climate, but trying to build resiliency in the woodlot. And the big thing, like I talked about a bunch of times, is this is really a very, very hemlock dominant stand. Basically what that's saying is it's dominated, so it's over 65% hemlock, and then needle cast just highlights the fact that there's really nothing in the understory here for a vegetative layer. And that's one of the big reasons why it's so concerning with HWAs. Hemlock's such a, you don't want to say one tree species is more important than the other, but with the amount of shade and cover that you get, hemlock's so important for, you'll find it quite often in a riparian zone, the zones along a brook. There's a lot of hemlock stands, especially in this area, kind of through a lot of Colchester, Cumberland County and stuff, that are all they're almost pure hemlock, and they're right around the same age. And if you trace it back, it kind of goes back to a big windstorm. And hemlock's never been a big economic driver. It's like you can always sell a little bit of it. They used to use a lot of it for actually take the bark, use it in the tanneries. It's got that nice, really red color to it. But what they think for stands like this, and they're actively looking for pole-sized hemlock stands because you just can't find them. But what they think happened in sites like this is that this would have been, say, 90 or 100 years ago, a big windstorm blew it all over, and you think big hemlocks, it was probably maybe old growth hemlock even at the time. When those come over, you get like 15 feet of trees and slash and everything else, and hemlock will grow in shade better than anything that we have in our forest. And so chances are that's probably the origins of these types of stands, and that's why you can get into them where they're actually an even age stand. So like even if this was 125 years old, probably wouldn't score very well as an old growth stand. It hits the age component just barely but you don't really get the multiple age classes. The other thing you notice in here, there's a few trees down, but really low on coarse woody materials. You can get into some hemlock and a bit of white pine and stuff, but I think it was 78 or 80 something % of the stand is hemlock. The hard thing with a Delgid is it tends to be a little bit spotty, and you kind of hear horror stories in Nova Scotia right now, but if you read through places like Connecticut, New York State, and they've been dealing with it for 30 years, and what they've found is there's spots where you'll get it in and like all your hemlocks are dead in 10 years, and there's other people that have had hemlock woolly Delgid on their lot and it's 30 years later and they still have some trees, and they keep losing them, but not all at once. One of the biggest things we always kind of encourage people to think about is, sure, like clean up what's down in, like we'll use the best information that we have based on stand type, anything else, to clean what's down. If the trees lasted through what was one of the worst hurricanes we've had in generations and they're still standing, let's just leave them that way. They're, you know, become important for vertical structure. I mean, you look at our Otter Ponds demonstration forest, there's some big spruce there, you know, big huge tops. They're on rocky, horrible soil, and it's just like a big sail stuck up in the wind. And while they lasted through Juan, they lasted through Dorian, they've gone through Fiona. We had like 500 km/h wind events post Fiona, and they're still standing there. There's a reason why that tree stayed. So sure, it's a big beautiful spruce and got, you know, a bunch of nice saw logs and stuff in it, but it's also one of the only good seed sources we have left around. It's really not that big of a timeline where deadwood goes from being risky to actually helps prevent wildfire. As soon as it starts to rot, it sucks up all that moisture and stuff. You actually retain a lot of moisture on the site and start to get good regen come up through there too. We were at a site, a nice hemlock stand in the west, where they're actually doing some mitigation stuff around a Delgid. There's this big long slope, and we were walking through. We had dug a bunch of big soil pits and everything, and the overstory, like the tree canopy layer, didn't change at all. It was the same as this SH1 sort of stand. As we went down and looked at the pits, so up at the top of the hill, good coarse textured soil, really well drained and stuff. Then you kind of got down further, there's like a little bit of a seep and like a kind of a bench, so you look and say, okay, well, it's imperfectly drained but still good soil. And then right down to the bottom, start to run into a ton of sphagnum. You're at the bottom of the slope in kind of like a broad, fairly level area and stuff. And when you actually looked at the soil down there, and we dug the soil pit, it filled right full of water. And it's one of those ones that highlights, like, you need to, if you were planning to harvest or anything, you want to look at it at a time when you can actually see the soils. Jim, the landowner, had gone through, and Kevin said, like, this is actually, so it would be soil type 4, so it's technically a wet soil on crown land. You can't even cut through there, even though it looks pretty much the same. It's all hemlock, but it's a really sensitive soil. There's just too much of a risk that you're going to do soil damage. And it's funny because Jim chimed up and he said, yeah, he said, I didn't look at the soils. He said, I just know it's wet down in there because the last time I took my tractor and I had to get two 20-ton excavators to pull me out, he buried his tractor right up to the seat of it. The thing about aspen is, especially this big one, that, you know, that's towards the end of that aspen's lifespan, and that's going to turn into just a beautiful big old snag if it doesn't blow down. The top's going to start blowing out of that. You can just see, I wouldn't be surprised somewhere if the woodpeckers are having a go at it already. I'm sure everyone knows, like, there's regulations and stuff around water courses and stuff, and it's a 20-meter riparian zone. But one of the things that I don't know if people get caught on it a lot, but there's definitely violations all the time. It's based on percent slope, and once you get over, I think, 20% slope, which this is way over that, technically where you start to measure your riparian zone is actually at the top of this hill, so everything else down there doesn't even count. So we'd have to go not 20 meters from the edge of it, because like a lot of times now, especially with, you know, mapping software, you're just going to look and draw 20 meters out from the, or like you might actually just have a stream line there and you just put a 20-meter buffer on it, which would only come to about here. Well, technically you got to be 20 meters further that way.